Hello and welcome to part 5 of Landed Cost Module Review. This is our final episode in which we will be talking about cost estimates. Cost estimates are used to calculate cost suggestions that include not only purchase price for an item, but also all the landed cost components. Cost estimates can calculate costs for standard costed items as well as for any other items such as FIFO or weighted average. One setup that we will need to calculate the cost estimates are the cost templates. So we will open a landed cost module, navigate to costing setup, and open our cost templates. Here we see 4 different cost templates. For each template, we can define shipping company, mode of delivery, shipping container that will be used, customs broker, and also the factor. Factor will be used to adjust calculated cost based on the specified factor. In case of the standard template, it will have a factor of 1. That means the calculated cost will be used as is. But for example, for the conservative template, we will multiply calculated cost by the factor of 2. Once we have configured our cost templates, we will now create our first cost estimate. We'll click on landed cost, periodic tasks, and cost estimate. The first selection we'll have to make is the cost template. We're going to use a standard template, meaning a factor of 1. The second one will be estimated date. The third one will be a measurement. So measurements are important if we're using auto costs that are calculated using a measurement method, in which case we will. So I will type in the measurement of 10, and I would like you to remember that number. Then we have to select journey template. Journey template will be used to decide from 2 ports, then that will in turn be used to decide which auto costs are applicable for that journey. So we have selected the template and it populated the from port and the to port. Then we will select currency. So let's use USD for this case. And then we need to populate estimated number of shipping containers and the folios. It's relevant if you have any auto costs that are populated on the folio or shipping container levels. In our case, all our auto costs are populated on the voyage level, so it's irrelevant how many shipping containers it will include, so we'll use values of 1 and 1. Site will be used to then create a standard cost record for the specific site. Let's use site number 1 as well. Once we have made all those selections, we will click on the Items tab right here on the top, and we will add 2 items to our cost estimate. The first item is I-100. Once we do that, the system will populate a primary vendor from the release product form, and then we have to specify the quantity. Let's say 1. Keep it simple. Now, that cost price is actually a purchase price from a specific vendor. So if you have a vendor-specific purchase price set up using a trade agreement, that's what you will see here. That's not an inventory cost. This is a purchase price for a specific vendor. In our case, this purchase price comes from the base purchase price set up on the release product form. Sales price is an optional field that is used to calculate estimated margin. So let's say we populate 2,000. And then the measurement. Remember, the measurement in the first screen was 10, but for this line, I will make a measurement of 1. And then I'll add a second line for item I-200. Again, this is a default vendor for that item. I'll populate the quantity, so 1. So we have only 2 items that are included on this cost estimate, both with quantity of 1. This cost price, again, is a purchase price for that default vendor. Populate the same sales price and then the measurement of 3. So what that means is we have a measurement of 10 on our parameters form, and then measurements of 1 and 3 for both of our lines. Now let's click on OK to see the results. All right, so this is our calculated cost estimate. We can look at all the cost estimates under Inquiries, Cost Estimates. This will show you all the estimates, and then we're going to scroll down and open the latest estimate we just calculated. Now let's take a closer look at the cost inquiry form. So what I'll do here is I'll simplify the view to only show breakdown by the item. So I see 2 lines and I see the estimated cost is $525 for the first item and $565 for the second item. So we need to understand how the system got to that result. So now I will introduce breakdown by the cost type. Now we're going to see the split. And now we see that $525 for the first item actually consists of 3 records. So let's take a look at the freight charges for both items. Where are they coming from? In order for us to understand that, we need to look at the auto costs. So for that purpose, I'll go to the costing setup and click on the auto costs. Here, I see 4 auto costs that were populated for the cost area voyage. And as I have said before, we don't have any auto cost for the shipping container level or the folio level. So that's why it was irrelevant how many shipping containers we have typed in that estimate. So let's stick to the voyage cost area. And now let's take a look at this first cost type, freight. It's using a calculation method fixed, and the value for that is $1,000. So we know that $1,000 have to be now apportioned between two lines, and the apportionment method for this auto cost is quantity. And remember, both items had the same quantity of 1, therefore that $1,000 will be evenly split between two items. So let's just go back here and just double check that. Yes, we have $500 for item I-100 and I-200 as well. So that explains the freight charge. Now let's take a look at the fuel cost type. It has a calculation category of rate, and the rate here is 2. So what the system does, it takes a global measurement that we have entered, in our case it was 10, and then multiplies it by the rate, which is 2. It gets $20. So now we have an estimated fuel charge calculated as $20. And now it uses the apportionment method of measurement to decide how to apportion those $20. Remember, our first item had a measurement of 1 and the second 3. So what the system does, it splits $20 into 4 pieces. So 20 divided by 4, $5. And then allocates 1 portion of it to the first item and 3 portions of it to the second item. So let's take a look. Fuel right here, first item $5 and the second item is $15. Now this is an interesting case right here. So I'm using the insurance cost type, and the calculation method here is percent, and in this case it's 10% based on linked cost type of freight. So what happened when I used the same auto cost setups when I was calculating true voyage costs in my video number 3, which you can also review, is it calculated a 10% of $1,000, which was the total freight. So what I have expected to see is 10% of $1,100. But if we look at our insurance value right here, we see that the total here is not 100, but rather $70. And if you remember the purchase price for both of those items, it was actually calculated as the 10% of it. So the first item had a purchase price $200, and therefore 10% of it would be $20 right here for insurance. And the second item had a purchase price of $500, and therefore 10% of it would be $50 right here. So I'm curious to hear your opinion if it's a specific configuration by design or there's something that I have missed. So what I'll do now here is I'll change my view back to eliminate the cost type codes. And now I see that my total landed cost components for the first item is $525. And then for the second item, it's $565. So just remember those two numbers right here. Let's go back to our main cost estimate screen. And now let's better understand how I actually got to that per unit estimated landed cost. So here's our cost price, $200. So we have $200 purchase price plus $525 for the first item. So we have $725 as our estimated landed cost. And the same thing right here, $500 purchase price plus $565, all the landed cost components, should give us $1,065. But if you look closer right here, we see it's added 50 cents to both lines. So in total, we have $1 extra that was split evenly between those two lines. If we go back to our auto cost right here, we see an overseas cost type code with a fixed value of $1. So we now know that there is $1 that now needs to be split based on the quantity. But the question is, why didn't it show up under my cost inquiries? Here I do not see my overseas cost type. Well, the answer here is that we have to take a closer look at how that cost type was actually set up. If I click on it, I'll see that the debit and the credit side was set up as the ledger account, whereas all other costs that we used had a debit of item and the credit of vendors. So that difference in setup have resulted in that cost not being visible from the cost inquiry screen. But if we look at the voyage costs right here, we can see our overseas with a fixed $1 right here, an estimated value of $1 as well. What we can also do in this screen is change those auto cost values to recalculate our cost estimate. So I'll click on the edit, and let's select, for example, my insurance value. Remember, 10% of not freight, but an item purchase price. And let's change it from 10 to 20%. Now we're going to close that form, and we're going to see that message that says changes have been made to the cost estimate. Estimated landed cost may need to be recalculated. So let's do just that. Just take a look at this per unit cost right now, $725.50 and $1065.50. Click on recalculate, and we see that it has increased by $20. And if we look at the cost inquiry right here, we now see that the insurance value has changed from 20 to 40, which is 20% of $200. And the same thing here, 20% of $500 right here. Once we are happy with our results, we can click on log to log that estimate. So from that point on, no edits are allowed to that specific cost estimate, and the only action that can be performed is a deletion of that estimate. And the final step in the whole process will be to update standard cost for our items. So if I click on that update standard cost, I can select items which I would like to update. The system will populate a default costing version from parameters, so in this case it's 10. Here are our new standard costs. Click on OK. We're going to see the message prices have been updated. And now if we open our released products, let's take a look at the first item. Go to the manage cost, item price. Let's take a look at our pending prices. Here we see $745.50 as our new pending price. It has not been activated yet, so it's really up to us to click on activate pending prices and say yes to activate that new cost. This is actually a standard costed item, so we see that right here. And at the same time, if we scroll to the item cost, we'll see that the item inventory cost price has also been updated with the latest standard cost. And for our second item, I200, that specific product is set up not as a standard cost item, but rather a FIFO product. Same actions had happened. So if we look at the item price, we see a pending price for the standard cost for this item as $1115.50, and then we can activate it to create a new active cost. At the same time, we're going to see new inventory costs updated here as well. The last thing I would like to talk to you about is the exchange rates. If we go into the landed cost parameters, we can enable a use shipping rate parameter right here and set it to yes, and then specify an exchange rate type. Exchange rate type will include the exchange rates that will be used to calculate our landed costs. So in this case, I'm using this market exchange rate type. And once I do that, let me just create a new cost estimate with the same parameters. The only difference is I will use a Canadian dollar currency instead of USD. And now we will select Canadian dollar instead of USD. Number of containers the same, site is the same. And let's add the same items. I100, quantity of 1. And if you remember, the cost here was 200 before, but now it has been converted using a default exchange rate type, and that's why we see a value of 204.40. And then for I200, the cost before was $500, but now it's converted. Let's see, quantity of 1 and then measurement of 3. But there is also something else had happened here. If we go into the cost inquiries, freight and fuel charges remained as they were, but the insurance, which was calculated as 10% of the purchase price, was calculated by applying two exchange rates at the same time. It applied a default exchange rate of 1.022, and then it applied a market exchange rate that was set up under landed cost parameters, which was 2 to 1, to come up with this value of $40.88 for the first item and $102.20 for the second item. So it's a bit more complicated setup that resulted in these values. That is all I wanted to show to you today. That concludes our landed cost module review. I hope you found it useful. Until the next time.